Good evening. Now we get to the, hopefully to the more thought-provoking content. And yes, I was introduced. My name is Fabian. I run a venture capital firm focused on artificial intelligence. I organize once in a year a large conference called Rise of AI. And I was asked to moderate the panel today. You were briefly introduced. I just touch again. So we have here Kate. She's an NLP expert with Babbel. They call it computational linguistic engineer. Yes, and it's a tongue breaker for me. Then we have Katja. She is, as most entrepreneurs are, consultant, speaker, advisor, everything in the digital world. And then we have Ben, also investor, entrepreneur, speaker, author. He runs his own AI company focused on Facebook communication, yes. Mm-hmm. And I heard he has 280 characters on Twitter. So he's privileged on this. So let's start with following. Please give me your definition of what artificial intelligence is today. And we start with you.
It's a pretty good, broad question to start out with. I think the definition of AI has been a moving target pretty much as long as the field has existed, and there's different traditions within it. I think nowadays it has a public perception of being something that's a bit scary and hyped, but then also trivial. It's the things that go wrong on your phone when Siri can't find what you need. But I would say, in a kind of general sense, it's any kind of automation or assisting of automation of decision making. So not sort of deterministic processes, which we've been using computers to do for a long time, but any time where you would take some form of reasoning or intelligence, however that gets represented, and apply it to a particular problem. And the big questions come with what is the right approach for the right problem.
Katja?
Well, as the name already says, it's artificial intelligence, so it's intelligence that is not made by a human, but by technology. So to me, it's self-operated technology. A friend just recently said to me, do we make machines human? I don't think that very much, but I think, well, we help machines for self-learning, and we are just at the very beginning of it, in my opinion.
I'm going to try two definitions because I feel like there's two separate ideas. There's AI, the industry, and then there's true AI, which if I were to define a true AI, it would be a machine with actual consciousness and intelligence. And that does not exist yet. So true AI does not exist. Anyone says we built a real AI is BSing you. AI, the industry, is a different term, I feel like. And it kind of encompasses anything that uses automation or learning to improve computing and to improve communication through computers. And so that can be like automation, that can be NLP, and then that can be machine learning. And they fall under this kind of broad industry term of AI. And that doesn't really clear up the understanding of what AI actually is, but that's how I feel about it right now.
Okay. So what I learned is that I see it with deal flow, and I would say 80% of startups claiming to have AI, they don't. Yes, so in 80% of the cases, it's a buzzword, it's marketing, and everyone jumped on the wagon, so it's really hard to identify those who work on it. The problem with AI is it moves forward, so what we thought was AI, like a chess computer, it's a chess computer today. Every GPS is based on AI. We don't see this anymore, so whatever is AI will move forward, and once it's solved, we call it software. Kate, so deep learning has had a lot of progress, especially 2012 and so forth, and that's why we have this new wave, because it's mainly driven by deep learning in combination with computing power and abundance of data. However, you are in the NLP case, which is very tricky, and AI still doesn't really understand us in this term. So is there anything new in NLP in the last years which is telling us while finally computers will start to understand what we say?
That's a good question. So deep learning has indeed brought a lot of advances in NLP. So there's a very popular deep learning model originated by mainly Mikolov at Facebook with word embeddings, and it has this really attractive property that you just give it a lot of text as input, and it automatically learns these statistical associations within them, and then it ends up with this really rich representation of words as a result, and it's quite good at figuring out if you put in a word like rain, that this is related to clouds and weather and stuff like that. So this technology is all around us. It's being used in lots of applications. And
for example, where do we see it already?
I mean, Google and Facebook are using it already, and it's also being used to improve machine translation and so on. But because it's based on this sort of statistical properties where it just learns from the data, it can also pick up things in the data that you don't necessarily want to be in the representation. And I think there's two main areas where this can be problematic. The first one is social bias, which the previous speaker was sort of illustrating, and you can see this really in action in places like if you open Bing Translate, Microsoft's translator, and put in the sentence, she is a lawyer, and ask it how to say it in German, it will give you, sie ist Anwalt. And if you want to speak German correctly for some crazy reason, then you probably want, sie ist Anwältin. And this is, on one hand, a level of language is just difficult, right? There's a grammatical rule in German that English doesn't have. This is, why Babbel is in business. But on another role, it reflects a social bias that's in there because it tells you what the system assumes the default gender for a lawyer. And if you aren't convinced by this, I invite you to type "he is a secretary" into Bing Translate and see what comes up. Google Translate, by the way, used to have this problem, but they have a good feedback system. So this is a good reason when you're doing AI, let people give you feedback when things are wrong.
So you touched a couple of very important points, and we'll come back to them, especially on the base of a bias. But Katja, how do you see changes in business models driven by AI? Or do you see that it's the same business model like the last 10 years? Or if I work with AI, do I have new ways to make money with this?
Good question, a very broad question, I suppose. So I see a lot of changes in business models. So my background is e-commerce, and when you look at e-commerce, you already use chatbots in customer service, but now as well in the, when you have complex products to sell, in advising your customers by guiding them through so they don't have to read a product description or look videos. The company I'm representing here is Visual West. It's a robo-advisor, so even in the word of the company type, robo. Whom of you know what a robo-advisor is? Okay, quite a bit. So it's an investment platform where you're guided through, you get some questions that probably you're at your bank branch, somebody, the consultant would ask you, and then you get a certain suggestion for your investment. So those types of robos are very simple today. You get the questions, behind you have an algorithm, and then you get a predefined portfolio. I think the next level there will be it will be created on demand, so you will have the intelligence behind, but there are tests today, but we are still not there to create that. So yes, there are...
What does about the business model change? I still pay fees to the bank, and now I pay fees to the company running the robot advisor. I still pay the fee.
Good question. The business model has changed in that perspective that you pay a lot less fee because there is an algorithm behind. So you can deliver a service a lot cheaper than when you have to have one advisor, individual, and consult you.
This leads to a hole down a different rabbit hole, though, because yes, with AI and with AI and machine learning, in certain cases, you can dramatically reduce costs. Automation is the base layer of that. We're seeing that in the most prominent example in self-driving cars, being able to probably eventually eliminate millions of jobs that people have from Uber driving to truck driving. But there's also a major societal impact to that. Yes, every truck company is going to switch to that because their bottom line is improved by having machines drive cars that do not get tired and do not get sick and don't have to be fed and have salaries. But there will be a major societal impact that I have no clue exactly what will happen, but no society is really ready for the idea that AI and automation dramatically lowers costs so much that thousands, millions of people are out of jobs that they used to have. And it's not just the jobs that you think they might be. AI is getting smart enough to do things like write journalistic pieces and getting into areas where you think your job is safe. It's not. My job's not safe. Your job's not safe. No one's job is safe.
I agree, but if I might add, it's a democratization as well of the whole thing, because access to those kind of portfolios you would have had 20 years ago if you spent a lot of money. So average people wouldn't have access to it. Last year at DLD, there was an amazing young entrepreneur, and he founded Do Not Pay. So he did democratize access to legal support for many people. And I think I agree. I mean, on the one hand, we probably are out of jobs, all of us, at one point. On the other hand, you have the democratization of services and not everybody had access to.
So you say it's reducing costs, which means labor costs, but then because it's getting cheaper, we all have more from it.
I think it can only be considered democratization of services if it also reflects the values we have as a society. So if we return to the question of bias, right, if we end up with services that are available to everybody, but we aren't recognizing the ways that they might magnify social inequality or stereotypes, then this is also not truly a democratization, even if we have cheap labor.
So let's stay with the bias part. Bias means, in general, we have the problem with AI that you take data, and if you take data, let's say you take pictures, Google had this problem. They uploaded a lot of pictures of humans, and then the algorithm was tagging humans, apes, and so far, and it was tagging like all the objects, but for black people, they thought it were gorillas. Because they didn't use black people as data at the beginning, so they didn't know that black people existed. So that we had definitely biased data, which leads to a wrong outcome. On the other hand, you train these systems to generate biases because it reduces computing power and so forth. They can make faster decisions. Everything we do is based on data we gather. We reduce it to a certain action. So how do you keep the balance between being efficient and trying to cover the whole world, which is computing power way very, very hard? And this is open to everyone.
I mean, I think if you're trying to cover the whole world, if you're launching projects on this scale, then I think it comes along with it that there's a responsibility on the part of the people who design and build AI systems to look at the goals of their system and the hazards that could result from it. So, like with this Sie ist Anwalt example, this, depending on your application, this, on the one hand, this reflects some statistics about professions in the world, so it is actually capturing some information that in some applications can be harmless or useful, but it could also be used in an application where, for example, in a search, it might turn up more male lawyers at the top than female, in which case it's not only reflecting the biases of the society, but magnifying them at the same time. And it's also the case that with these statistical models that they can pick up noise that interacts with these biases. So I have some research recently about how these word embedding models don't just learn the social bias of gender, but because a table is masculine in German and feminine in Spanish, it learns to associate this as being very manly, but only in the German model, and this as being very feminine in Spanish. And this produces not just actual bias that reflects information in the world that may or may not be useful, it can also reflect noise. So there's different kinds of bias, and we have to approach them strategically. But I think we do have a moral responsibility in the AI community to deal with it.
Every company needs to review the human input that they're putting. Almost every single AI system starts in some way with human input, whether it's humans programming the initial part of the language or providing information for the machine learning. Example I like to talk about is when Google, had that drawing application where everybody could draw things and it would predict, is that a shoe, is that a cannon? But it would know, for example, most of the time, when you said shoe, draw a shoe, most people would draw something like this, whatever's on my foot. But high heels are shoes and sandals are shoes. They were the minority in the amount of shoes they were drawn, but they were shoes. And it took longer for those systems to recognize, oh, that's also a shoe. And if you ask the Google system, what is a shoe, it would probably show the shoe I'm wearing first, or your shoe, instead of what a high heel. And so you have to kind of look at that, what is the input first? When you're putting into a system, what is a lawyer? Are you putting in a picture of a man or a woman? Are you trying to put in both? Is it what, there's all these kinds of things that you have to think about in the initial input that we kind of just gloss over because we don't think about that impact on machine learning over the long term.
So when we speak about bias, let's take the example of Facebook. Because my theory is Facebook makes money because they support bias. They make money the more time you spend on Facebook, means the more you have content you like, the more you click on it, the more you click on advertising, you see advertising. On the other hand, it also means they only show you stuff you like, which means within your bubble, you only get stuff within your bubble, so the algorithm is optimized on biases. What's your take on this?
Don't you decide on that by yourself? I mean, first of all, we all live in our kind of own bubble. I mean, you decide which kind of news you look and which kind of news news channel you believe, or where you generate your information. So, if Facebook is your only channel where you kind of stick and get information, and then of course you're biased. And depending on when you are in your Facebook account, I mean, then you get either the one information and you miss out the other. So. Yes, you're right, but end of day, I mean, that's our own responsibility still.
Is it?
Disagree with that, actually, because there's lots of places, especially like in the rural US, where you don't have access to just all the information or have all the time. Facebook is like, you can't drop Facebook, because that is where your social circle is, that is where you see your friends. If you're not on it, you can't get career opportunities, you can't find out what's happening with your friends, because that really matters. It's almost required. And so as a result, you do have to look at that feed every day, and whatever is being put in there is what you're consuming. And so there is a responsibility, like yes, we could say to some extent there's a responsibility on your part as an individual to seek out other sources of information. But for lots of people, they don't have time. They have like just a few minutes after working 2 jobs and like taking care of the kids, and they just need to check what their friends are doing, and this is where they're getting their information. So there's also a responsibility, as I think Facebook has seen, on their part, to put systems to prevent false information, or to create systems where people can access more information. And the truth is, there will never be a perfect system. There is no simple solution, simply because Facebook's reach is so massive and is such a large percentage of how people consume information. And that's not going to change in any time in the next decade.
So for normal newspapers, we have boards and governments who check on them that they don't lie and that they try to be neutral and so forth, and they don't promote hate and so forth. So the media companies, Google and Facebook, they tried to prevent this. They didn't see themselves as a media company, more like a tech company. Do you think they should take over responsibility for the societal impact they have?
I think we don't, as a society, have an idea of how to regulate AI or automation right now. That's just a big black hole, right? We've got not a lot of education of it on the policy side, and it's just sort of left in the hands of the people in tech to do. And there's a lot of good people interested in the societal well-being in tech, but you can't leave it up to that, because, in fact, there are other incentives in mind, the profit incentive, right, which can steer you towards bias even if it's opposed to a goal of an equitable society. So I do think there has to be more broad education about the risks inherent and the potential of these automations, so that instead of having a sort of hysterical or frightened debate about it in the public, we can really say, what are the things that we need to see in these systems, and how can we make sure that they're not going off the rails?
So when we are the part of risk with the systems, yes, a lot of people have fear for AI, and I want to touch this first before we speak about the non-fears and the good part. So I was attending with the Foreign Ministry and Security Defense Ministry about AI, and they have the fear of, first, let's say, Russian hackers using AI tools to use Ukraine power plants and so forth to hack them, but also they said like every ISIS fighter takes a DJI drone or Parrot drone equipped with a sensor who recognizes something, and they just say you explode whenever you wish to go, which is outside of the GPS, because today if you drop bombs and you have a GPS jammer, they don't know where you are anymore. So please see risks where AI could harm society on an individual level, but also on a bigger level, because they exist, and I want to touch them.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
There's also no end to this sort of thing, and this is not a new kind of problem. AI is the new version of the problem, but every single time a new technology is built, it can be used by, quote unquote, the bad guys or the good guys. And we consistently, as a society, struggle with, like, we had the struggle with nuclear weapons, and we still have the struggle with nuclear weapons. We have the struggle with AI, we had the struggle with cars. We have the struggle with all of these different things.
But look, for cars, I have a belt. Yes, for nuclear weapons, we don't even allow other countries to have nuclear weapons. For for normal weapons like shotguns and so forth, outside of the United States, you have pretty strict laws for this. So you can react. So you say
we will find a way. I'm an optimist. We will find a way to adapt. The difficulty is that AI is more easily accessible, or the broad term, than, say, a nuclear weapon. But I also believe that, like, you're already seeing governments building systems to protect themselves. You're already seeing people using AI for the vast majority of the time for really good use cases. We can always be worried about the worst case scenarios and the worst cases. But rather than, like, my general thesis is, rather than being scared of that and rather than thinking about, like, how do we heavily regulate this so that no one can use it, you can't really prevent it. It's already out of the box. And so you just need to, one, trust that most people will use it for good, and two, you need to create safeguards on your own as a government, as you're seeing now in terms of hacking and elections and things like that. There's no simple answer every time. Like, there's no way to regulate and say, like, only these people could use these AIs and these specific kinds of things. It's too accessible.
But what could be safeguards?
One of the threats we already touched is jobs, and it will cut jobs. I mean, so far it's still simple jobs, but very soon it's going to be more qualified jobs. And I don't even think we see an end to it yet. I mean, now we have already AI used in medicine. There is the first bot that is helping with depression, which is great on one hand, but we are moving forward, and we are not talking about training on the jobs anymore. We are talking about high qualified jobs not in a long run future. And so what does that do with society? I think that could be a big threat we should think about, because if I always say I would never be bored because there's too many things I'm interested in, but how would it be if I don't have a real sense in what I'm doing if there is no job anymore? I don't know. And probably none of us does. I don't know.
So the whole, what do we do in the jobless future and the
Party
work-free
and drink
future?
beer all day.
Yes, so some people do this. Yes.
My idea.
Then let's move to you touched good parts. So what is today good about AI? It means, where does it already increase our health, our wealth, and our happiness?
Health, wealth, and happiness.
Wow. Okay, health, wealth, happiness. I mean, everywhere. I mean, okay, so health, we're already seeing AI be, like, Watson is your best known example of diagnosis.
Have you ever used Watson for yourself? Like, are you healthier because Watson exists?
But the thing about AI is not like you're going to ever, the vast majority of the time in which it's helping our society is not going to be very visible. Okay. It's not going to be like, hey, I'm talking to Watson today. It's going to be because some kind of discovery was made, because in the background somewhere, some algorithm that was Watson or something else helped figure out this specific formula for this specific medication that is going to make your life 15% less painful. And that, like, the most of the best of AI and true AI and where it's actually helping us is in this background that we're not seeing. The, like, sexy stuff is like, oh, AlphaGo, Google is, like, beating everybody at playing Go. But the really good stuff that's helping wealth and health and happiness is all happening in the background is quote-unquote boring SaaS-style companies using AI for image recognition, for agriculture as an example. Like Descartes Labs is using it to, like, figure out, like, all sorts of issues happening in agriculture and helping farmers improve their yields, which means better health for the entire world. It just takes many steps. It's happening at a chain that we cannot see, but is really impacting us now.
This is trust, so I ask for examples, because everyone thinks, yes, like, fears are concrete, and good parts are, like, so soft. So I want to have positive examples.
I think there are some visible examples. So GPS, right? Can you imagine driving anywhere without Google Maps right now? And I think there's a little gadget somewhere out there now with this real-time translation, right?
We have it here?
I heard. I haven't seen it myself. But Google's now released this, like, in-ear real-time translation, yes. Right? So this will presumably make it possible for you to communicate with people in real time before, who you had no chance of doing so. So there are a lot of ways in which it's visibly improving our lives.
And wealth? How do we get richer because of AI? Because if you say we lose jobs, this first sounds like negative part, but how do we get wealthier?
How do we get wealthier? Yeah, Well, probably because we have a democratization in investment as well. But how do you get wealthy? Maybe we only. But that's very philosophical. Maybe we shouldn't define wealth only by money. Wealth can be, to me, as well, to have more free time. And
I didn't say money.
yeah, okay. So wealth as well means to have more access to health. So today there are already some projects with artificial intelligence when it comes to genetic disease. But these genetic diseases have such a small percentage of people that it wouldn't, the investment of humans, researchers working on it wouldn't, the investment just wouldn't pay off. So with machine learning, you can start working on those smaller diseases. So it's solving health issues. Having more time would make me more happy, or spending my time more wisely.
So, Siri, Cortana, Alexa, and so forth, does any of these tools make anyone here more happy?
We need to do some focus groups. But, I mean, if it didn't make people happy, they wouldn't be buying it, is my general thesis, but could be completely wrong. But in general, like, I don't know, but I can only go from personal example.
Please, I ask for personal opinion.
I definitely use my Alexa and my Google Home every single day to get bits of information, to ask random questions. And it's definitely made it so that I've had to look at screens less, or I have been able to turn on lights very easily, and like little things like that. Does that make me happier?
No, but
probably.
that sounds like making you lazier.
Lazy makes me happy, okay?
Okay.
Makes a lot. Does being lazy make you a little bit happier? Yes. Okay. There's your focus group.
I will say that I don't think that the AI easing various tasks is going to produce a greater spread of wealth in and of itself without some concerted social effort. So far, the trends have just been that it's increased the concentration of, I mean, if 3 million trucker jobs go away, the income is not being just shared between those that's being laid off, right? It's going into those who automated the system. So without some concerted social effort, again, to figure out what are the goals and the hazards of the system and what do we want out of it as a society, it's not going to happen automatically.
So this is like, whenever I have a panel like this is like the big elephant in the room. We speak about mass unemployment. None for us, and I guess no one here will be unemployed, but we all have some people out there where we think they could not adapt to the change fast enough. On the other hand, we want to have cheaper goods. Yes, I mean, everyone who has a cell phone, you killed a lot of secretary jobs and travel agent jobs and so forth. So do you ever feel bad about this? Because you support technology, but you know, and on the other end, someone loses a task and maybe will not be able to adapt to it, but you will never know who it is. It's just that you're driving this trend.
So being in the very fortunate position of working for an app that helps people learn languages, huh? I don't have to face so many moral conundrums of those lines. It's mostly about applying intelligence and domain expertise to help people learn something. So I sleep well.
Okay. You too? You both sleep well?
The overall, I sleep well. The reason, but I sleep like a rock anyway. But if you have to take the long view, which is, in every iteration so far, technology has improved our lives, like in real, tangible ways. It has increased our quality of life. It has increased our life expectancy. It has decreased infant mortality rates. There are like clear, objective ways to say like technology has improved our lives, and there always are and always will be, and especially at this point, be transitions where lots of people have hardships. But the longer term view is that this kind of technology will improve all of society. There will be more yields per acre because of AI. There will be more time per person because of AI. More people will be able to pursue the passions they actually want to pursue. And we need to do the best we can to help in that transition, because the cat's out of the bag. Like lots of jobs, like driving jobs will disappear. They just, like, the vast majority will disappear. It's going to happen. It's whether or not we are compassionate enough to find ways to help those people through that transition, through those changes, and to start doing that now rather than when it's already too late.
Adding to this, and current system is based on those who work a lot share something of this with those who work little, of the surplus. We call this taxation on salary and so forth. But the trend is, if we lose, or we need for AI less people to work, this doesn't work. And the SM AI is mostly owned by entrepreneurs and venture capitalists. So how do we secure that we can finance this and still spread the wealth some for even to cover everyone? Because the old system won't work forever.
This is a political problem and not an AI problem as much.
regulation.
This is the entire political problem that has taken up the last 5 years across the globe. And if you have a solution, if anyone has a solution for it, please call me, because I haven't figured out one.
I told you before I will try to ask the harder questions.
These are easy.
No, you avoid it like a
But
politician.
there's no simple answer.
There is
to
no
that
simple
one.
answer. No, and I mean, do I sleep well? That was your former question. I do, but I think it's in all our responsibility as well to find a solution. And as you just said, there is no simple answer to that. But we need either, if it would be, we have to find different ways to live together as a society, work-wise, money-wise, definitely, nature-wise. I mean, so. You know, maybe we can find new models and people who are free taking part in other parts of society and get paid for it and have kind of a wealth transfer.
Okay, so I move to now a topic which I just added to the agenda after we had a small conversation there, which is brain-machine interfaces. Yes, and for those who maybe know it or not, Elon Musk, Google, Facebook, and co, they are working on it. It's a small device which is able to read kind of your thoughts, at least your electronical signals, and is able to transmit them. So Facebook is working on a device which lets you update your Facebook status by thinking about it within the next 2 years. That's the goal. By the way, everything is financed by DARPA, the American Military Research Institute, because they love to know what you think. So we had now the discussion let's assume we have a device which lets you think and transfer electronical signals between humans. Do we still speak?
Yeah, we do.
I love to speak. Of course I will still speak.
But you disagree.
No, cute. Well, I disagree with you. No. All right, brain-machine interfaces seem like a long time away, but they're really not. I mean, Elon Musk is probably going to be offering it to everybody here in about 5 years, is kind of my prediction. He's going to be like, hey, would you like to get a little thing inserted into your brain? I actually think this will probably happen. The thing, though, is that it's not going to suddenly be this like magical transfer like the Matrix where information is plugged in and now I know how to fly a helicopter. Our brains are built and designed to think through language. That's how we naturally do it. That's how children and babies naturally learn the world around them. And just because we have a little plug-in in our brain doesn't mean that's going to automatically change. We honestly don't know what will fully happen. Maybe we do eventually go to more imagery or not. Who knows? But at least in the initial phases, we will still be based on the structures of society, which are language, which are names, which is communicating through words that translate into thoughts and actions.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think language is really the original cognitive technology, and everything we've been building since then is trying to replicate the amount of power that can be communicated through. Why do you think we're here doing this?
So do you think then we just communicate faster? Because I don't have to use speech, which is an algorithm for thoughts, and data, which is sometimes a terrible algorithm because they are like subtext and so on. I mean, you always had a conversation maybe with your friend who you really didn't understand what they want to say. You think we could communicate more clear? There's
a lot of information about there's a lot of research about the amount of information that's encoded in language, right, and the way that you could represent it in terms of entropy. And the general consensus, I think, is that it's always doing a lot of different things. So one of the shortcomings of the NLP algorithms of the past has been that they've been trying to look at language in a singular thing of its own without looking at the larger social context around it, and it's always interacting with that. So it's actually a very efficient mechanism of compressing information under certain views, such as the context that we all live in, and this is why we keep using it.
Okay, I actually need to ask 2 quick questions. All right, panelists, if Elon Musk came to you and said, I want to put an implant in your brain so that you can link your brain to other people, would you agree to it?
Question back. if I can link to their brain, could they then link to my brain back?
No,
It
you
would be a two-way connection
No,
if they
I
linked.
want the one way.
You want the one way?
Yeah.
I don't know. Ask Elon. If
But-
it was one way, would you do it?
Yes. I mean,
Okay.
to
If
have
you had the right
access-
to stop somebody else from taking information out.
Maybe I would even do the two-way, but I mean, to have access to so many intelligent people, wouldn't it be amazing? I mean, you could learn so much quicker instead of reading or listening, or just to have access to it. I mean, yes,
So
I think I would do it.
I think I'm still going to bet on language as being the most efficient way for me to get the information I need from people's brains without all the noise around it. Like, I have enough noise in my own brain. I don't need that from somebody else.
I already know your answer. I'm curious, audience. Would you raise your hand? Would you, if Elon Musk offered that to you, would you let him do it? Raise your hand if you'd actually say yes. This is the.
We've got an
it's
adventurous
not,
crowd.
This is like less than 10%.
No, that's
We're
like-
not there yet.
6 people.
We're not there yet.
But
That's,
you-
that's like 3%.
but
That
the
means
same-
we are not competing with too many when Elon shows up.
You have to imagine that brain-machine interfaces will be like smartphones one day. So you could ask the same one who does not have a smartphone here.
That number
Yes.
will go up for sure.
You
And
think
then
so?
eventually we'll all probably have it. But until then.
So we touched this briefly too in the preparation. You mentioned Ray Kurzweil. Do you think that the whole belief in singularity and AI will solve the world and so forth is a new form of religion? And since you are from Silicon Valley, this is like the epicenter, like the new Jerusalem for it, because there's like where all the transhumanists and posthumanists, they all merge and meet and try to change the world and the rest of society and, yes, humankind.
Did you know? I'm sure you know. I don't know how many people know. There's now an official religion based around artificial intelligence, started by what?
It was an ex-Google guy.
By an ex-Google guy,
It's
Fred,
no.
who
Kurzweil.
started a religion based around AI. So I guess it's already happening. I'm not joining anytime
But most
soon.
churches are there for tax reasons, so.
For tax reasons, yes. The heck if I know. There was an interesting series of videos that I saw, because part of the whole thing of the singularity is that we'll be able to live forever, upload our brain, et cetera, et cetera. And I think right now, most of society has a bias towards like, do you really want to have the option to live forever? But I do think that in the long term, society will come to this idea that death is not a natural part of life, but is more like a disease like all the other diseases that we have conquered over time. And if suddenly it was conquered in some way, specifically aging, which is entirely plausible, maybe, then I think the entire view of society on that would change. Now, what does that do for society when you can choose when you want to die? I don't know. Is the singularity going to happen? Hell, if I know, nobody really knows. I know nothing.
So but touching on this, let's assume singularity is the point where we conquer death and could upload ourselves and so forth. Do you believe that this moment will appear in human time?
In human time, this
But
generation,
will it appear? Just
it
yes.
will appear. I believe it will appear. It will happen.
Katja?
Nope.
Yeah, I'm pretty bearish on this one as well. I will say that if we don't start dealing with the challenges and the biases posed by this technology in our society now, we will be incredibly ill-equipped to deal with this singularity if it happens.
So do you think, I mean, my answer is clear, yes. Do you think it will happen in our lifetime? Will we conquer death? I mean, you already said no, but.
In my lifetime, it won't happen. I don't think so. I mean, anytime later, maybe. But
Do we have hope to conquer death?
I say like maybe 2 to 3 lifetimes. If I had to make a random guess, but honestly, I'm pulling out of my butt here. I don't actually really know. The innovations are happening, but we've been trying to conquer death since the beginning of human time. So,
Did we really? Because most religions are based on accepting death and optimizing for the life after.
but you could also say that our view of conquering death is since we can't conquer, we're saying that we've conquered death by life is actually eternal, it just transfers afterwards. There's lots of ways to translate that. So, is this the peak in the generation? I don't know. We're closer than we ever been, but I have no clue on the exact timing. I do think it will happen.
Good. So this thing is already blinking all the time. And we want to stay. So my final question is, assuming we will reach this or not, how old do you want to be? So death is not the point. How old would you like to be?
How old would I
Yes.
like to be? Can I stop my aging right now?
No one wants to die tomorrow, so just give
Well,
us a brief
no,
number.
this matters. Because if I can live to 250, but I'm going to have to live like a 130-year-old for the rest of my life, I don't want that. If I can live to 250 and be a 32-year-old, I will take that.
Good, so how old? 250?
Well, can I be 32?
Yes, you can.
Sure, why not? I have no clue. I'd want to keep going until I'd want to at least have the option. It's kind of like I want to at least have the option to call all in.
That's an easy one. I mean, if I really age, I would say it would be nice to be 101 years old, because then I have my 100 and have one more year to kind of settle down, and yeah.
Okay, 101.
I would like to live as long as possible in a society that has figured out how to justly tackle these questions. And otherwise, I'll take what we've got now.
But we have other problems to figure out first before this one.
Good. So I always ask this, and I get mostly answers from like 70, 80, because they're bored of life, and I only got one answer. It was eternity, or I call the foundation, it's 10,000 years. Yes, why not trying to achieve at least? And it's, yes, I agree, it needs to be a society. That's why I try to read from the foundation, which is going over the whole time. It's tricky.
No, I was just Mike, sorry, last final note. Before we figure that part out, let's use what AI is practically now to solve real problems like global warming, like climate change, like these kinds of things, and then we could tackle the problem of death itself. But we got to tackle the immediate threats, and we have this great technology and these great engineers and these great entrepreneurs, and let's tackle those kinds of problems, and because they are the more immediate threat to our future as an entire society.
So, wonderful closing words. Thank you.
Yeah.